My wife told me her ex-boyfriend came back into her life and they were just reconnecting as friends after 15 years apart. When I found them together, she said it's not what it looks like. I said you're absolutely right, let me help you reconnect with more old times. What I reconnected her with was perfect. I'm 38M and my wife Jessica 36F have been married for 12 years. We met in college, dated for 3 years, and built what I thought was a solid marriage. We have 2 kids, Emma 10F and Jake 8M, and own a beautiful home in the suburbs. Jessica works as a nurse at the local hospital while I'm a software engineer. Until 6 months ago, I genuinely believed we were happy and committed to each other. Jessica has always been social and maintained friendships with people from different periods of her life. She's on social media, goes to high school reunions, and keeps in touch with college friends. I've never had a problem with this because she's always been transparent about her friendships and I trusted her completely. That trust was apparently misplaced. The problem started 6 months ago when Jessica began acting differently. She was more secretive with her phone, started working late more often, and seemed distracted during family time. When I asked if everything was okay, she said she was just stressed about work and dealing with some personal stuff she needed to figure out. I've been thinking a lot about my past lately, she told me one evening. Sometimes I wonder about the paths I didn't take and the people I lost touch with over the years. I told Jessica that it was normal to reflect on your past and that if she wanted to reconnect with old friends, I thought that was healthy. I suggested she might enjoy reaching out to people she'd been curious about. I had no idea I was essentially giving her permission to destroy our marriage. 3 weeks later, Jessica came home from work looking unusually excited. She said she'd received a message on social media from someone she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. "You remember me talking about Ryan, right?" she said. "My boyfriend from before I met you? He reached out today and said he'd been thinking about me. Apparently he's going through a divorce and wanted to reconnect with old friends." I vaguely remembered Jessica mentioning Ryan early in our relationship. According to her, they'd dated seriously for about 2 years in her early 20s but had broken up when Ryan moved across the country for work. She'd always described it as a what-if relationship that ended due to circumstances rather than problems. "That's nice," I said. "It's always interesting to hear from people from your past. How is he doing?" Jessica said Ryan was struggling with his divorce and feeling nostalgic about simpler times in his life. He'd apparently been going through old photos and memories and decided to reach out to people who had meant something to him. "He asked if we could catch up over coffee sometime," Jessica said. "I told him I'd think about it. I mean, we're both married with kids now, so it's not like it would be anything more than just reminiscing about old times." I told Jessica that I thought it would be fine for her to meet Ryan for coffee if she wanted to. I said I trusted her judgment and that there was nothing wrong with maintaining friendships with people from her past as long as everything was above board. Over the next few weeks, Jessica and Ryan began texting regularly. Jessica would mention their conversations casually, telling me about Ryan's divorce proceedings and how difficult it was for him to start over at 38. She said he was looking for a job in our area and might be moving back to town. "It's really sad," Jessica said. "His wife apparently cheated on him with her coworker and destroyed their 15-year marriage. He's devastated and trying to figure out how to rebuild his life." I felt sympathy for Ryan's situation and told Jessica it was kind of her to be supportive during his difficult time. She said Ryan had always been a good person and that she felt obligated to help him through his crisis since they'd meant so much to each other years ago. Jessica and Ryan finally met for coffee about a month after their initial contact. Jessica came home from their meeting talking about how good it was to see him and how much they'd both changed over the years. "It was really nice," she said. "We talked for hours about everything that's happened since we lost touch. He's still the same sweet, thoughtful person I remembered, just older and wiser now." I asked Jessica how Ryan was handling his divorce. She said he was struggling but trying to stay positive. According to Jessica, Ryan had said that talking to her reminded him that good people still existed and that not all relationships ended in betrayal. "He said I was one of the few women he'd ever trusted completely," Jessica told me. "It made me feel good to know that our relationship meant as much to him as it did to me." After their coffee meeting, Jessica and Ryan's texting increased dramatically. Jessica would be on her phone constantly, smiling at messages and typing long responses. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say it was Ryan and that he was going through a particularly rough patch with his divorce. "He really needs someone to talk to right now," Jessica explained. "His family lives far away and he doesn't have many close friends here yet. I think our conversations are helping him process everything he's been through." Jessica started meeting Ryan for coffee once a week, then twice a week, then almost daily. She said he was apartment hunting and needed advice about different neighborhoods. She said he was struggling with loneliness and needed companionship during his transition. Ryan asked if I could help him look at apartments this weekend, Jessica told me on a Friday evening. "His realtor is busy and he values my opinion about what would work for someone starting over." I asked Jessica if it was appropriate for her to be spending so much time with her ex-boyfriend, especially since he was going through an emotional divorce. She said I was being paranoid and that their relationship was purely platonic. "Ryan and I are both mature adults who are committed to our families," she said. "He's a friend who needs support, and I'm happy to provide it. There's nothing inappropriate about helping someone you care about during a difficult time." 2 months after Jessica and Ryan reconnected, Jessica's behavior became even more concerning. She started working extra shifts at the hospital, claiming they were short-staffed and needed her help. She'd come home late in the evening looking tired but oddly energized. "The hospital is crazy right now," she'd say. "But it feels good to be making a difference and helping people during their worst moments." Jessica also started going to the gym more frequently, buying new clothes, and paying more attention to her appearance. When I complimented her on looking great, she said she was just trying to take better care of herself and set a good example for our kids. "I want Emma and Jake to see that it's important to prioritize your health and well-being," she said. "I've been neglecting myself for years and I'm finally making time for self-care." 3 months after the reconnection, Jessica announced that Ryan had found an apartment just 15 minutes from our house. She said he was excited to be close to his old hometown and was looking forward to rebuilding his social life. "Ryan is so grateful for all the support I've given him," Jessica said. "He said having me in his corner made all the difference in helping him get through the worst period of his life." I asked Jessica if she thought it was wise for Ryan to live so close to us, given their history and his current emotional state. She said I was being ridiculous and that proximity didn't change the nature of their friendship. "Ryan is going to be a part of this community," she said. "It would be weird if I suddenly stopped being friends with him just because he lives nearby. Besides, you might actually like him if you gave him a chance." Jessica suggested that we invite Ryan over for dinner so I could meet him and see for myself that he was just a friend going through a difficult time. I agreed, thinking it might help me understand their relationship better and ease my growing concerns. Ryan came to dinner the following Saturday, and I have to admit he seemed like a decent guy. He was polite, charming, and appropriately grateful for Jessica's support during his divorce. He talked about his kids, his new job, and his hopes for the future. He thanked me for sharing my wife's friendship and said he hoped we could all be friends. "Jessica has been incredible during this transition," Ryan told me. "I don't know how I would have gotten through the past few months without her support and encouragement. You're lucky to have such a compassionate, caring wife." I agreed that Jessica was compassionate and caring, but I noticed the way Ryan looked at her when he thought I wasn't paying attention. There was an intimacy in their interactions that seemed to go beyond casual friendship. After Ryan left, I told Jessica that he seemed nice but that I was still concerned about the amount of time she was spending with him. She said I was being possessive and that she was allowed to have friendships outside our marriage. "Ryan is going through the worst time of his life," she said. "If you were in his situation, wouldn't you want friends to support you? I'm just being a good person and helping someone who needs it." 4 months after the reconnection, Jessica's late nights and phone calls with Ryan became even more frequent. She said Ryan was struggling with depression and needed someone to talk to when his thoughts got dark. She said she was worried about his mental health and felt responsible for making sure he didn't do anything drastic. "Ryan called me crying last night," Jessica told me one morning. "He said he felt like his life was over and that he didn't see the point in continuing. I had to talk him through it and remind him that things would get better. I suggested that if Ryan was having suicidal thoughts, he should be talking to a professional therapist rather than relying on my wife for mental health support." Jessica said he was seeing a therapist but that sometimes he needed immediate support when he was having crisis moments. "Therapy is only once a week," she said. "What's he supposed to do when he's having a panic attack at 2 a.m.? I'm not going to ignore someone who might hurt themselves just because you're feeling insecure about our friendship." 5 months after the reconnection, I decided to surprise Jessica at work with lunch. When I arrived at the hospital, her colleagues told me she wasn't working that day. I called Jessica's phone and she answered sounding flustered, saying she was running errands and would be home soon. When Jessica got home, I asked her why the hospital staff said she wasn't working when she'd told me she was picking up an extra shift. She said there had been a miscommunication and that she'd been called off at the last minute. "They had too many nurses scheduled," she said. "So I used the free time to help Ryan with some errands. His car is in the shop and he needed a ride to pick up his prescription and do some grocery shopping." I asked Jessica why she hadn't told me the truth about where she was. She said she didn't think it was important and that she knew I'd make a big deal about her spending time with Ryan. "You've been acting paranoid about our friendship for months," she said. I didn't want to deal with another interrogation about helping a friend with basic errands. That night, I checked Jessica's phone while she was in the shower. What I found made my blood run cold. There were hundreds of text messages between Jessica and Ryan, many of them sent during times when Jessica had told me she was working late or doing other things. The messages started innocent enough, but over the months they had become increasingly intimate and inappropriate. Ryan was telling Jessica how much he missed her and how being with her made him remember what real love felt like. Jessica was responding with similar sentiments, saying that reconnecting with him had reminded her of who she used to be. Recent messages were even more damning. Ryan was talking about how they belonged together and how he'd never stopped loving her. Jessica was saying that she felt the same way but that the situation was complicated because of our kids and our marriage. "I think about you constantly," one of Jessica's messages read. "Being with you feels like coming home after being lost for 15 years. Ryan's response was, "Leave him. We've wasted enough time apart. We're meant to be together." Jessica's reply, "I know. I just need to figure out how to do this without destroying Emma and Jake's lives." I screenshot the messages and spent the rest of the night planning my next move. Jessica was clearly having an emotional affair with Ryan and was planning to leave our marriage. The question was whether they'd crossed the line into a physical affair yet. The next day, I hired a private investigator to document Jessica's activities. I also consulted with a divorce attorney to understand my rights and options. If Jessica was planning to destroy our family for her ex-boyfriend, I wanted to be prepared. The private investigator's first report came back a week later. Jessica had been meeting Ryan at his apartment regularly during times when she claimed to be working extra shifts. They'd been seen kissing and holding hands in parking lots, walking together like a couple, and staying at his apartment for hours at a time. 2 weeks later, I decided to catch them in the act. Jessica had told me she was working a double shift and wouldn't be home until late. Instead of working, she was at Ryan's apartment. I drove there and parked across the street, waiting to see what would happen. Around 8 p.m., I saw Jessica's car in Ryan's parking lot. I walked up to his apartment and could hear voices and laughter through the door. I knocked, and after a long pause, Jessica answered looking shocked and guilty. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to block my view into the apartment. "I could ask you the same thing," I said. "Especially since you're supposed to be working a double shift at the hospital." Ryan appeared behind Jessica, wearing only a t-shirt and boxer shorts. Jessica was in a robe that clearly wasn't hers. They both looked like they'd been caught doing exactly what they were doing. "This isn't what it looks like," Jessica said quickly. Ryan was having a panic attack and I came over to help him. He spilled wine on my clothes, so I borrowed his robe while they were drying. I looked past them into the apartment and saw an open bottle of wine, 2 glasses, and what was clearly a romantic dinner set up with candles and music. "You're right," I said, smiling at Jessica. "This isn't what it looks like. What it looks like is a casual affair, but based on your text messages, this is actually a full-blown love story where you're planning to leave your husband and kids for your ex-boyfriend." Jessica's face went white. "What text messages?" "The ones where Ryan tells you he's never stopped loving you and you tell him that being with him feels like coming home," I said. "The ones where you discuss leaving me and figuring out how to do it without destroying our children's lives." Ryan stepped forward, trying to take control of the situation. "Look man, I know this is complicated, but Jessica and I have a history that goes back long before you were in the picture." I looked at Ryan and smiled. "You're absolutely right about having history. And you're right that this is complicated. In fact, let me help you both reconnect with some more history and complications." Update 1. Jessica and Ryan stood in the doorway looking confused and nervous about what I meant by helping them reconnect with more history and complications. They clearly expected me to either explode in anger or break down in tears, but my calm demeanor was throwing them off. "What do you mean by that?" Jessica asked suspiciously. I pulled out my phone and showed them photos that the private investigator had taken of them together over the past 2 weeks. There were pictures of them kissing in parking lots, holding hands while walking, and entering Ryan's apartment together on multiple occasions. "I mean that your secret relationship is about to become a lot less secret," I said. "See, while you two were reconnecting, I was doing some reconnecting of my own. I reconnected with a private investigator, a divorce attorney, and several people who are going to be very interested in your love story." Jessica tried to grab my phone. "You had me followed? How could you violate my privacy like that?" "Privacy?" I laughed. "Jessica, you've been lying to me for months about where you are and what you're doing. You've been having an affair while I've been home taking care of our children. I think my right to know where my wife actually is trumps your right to privacy about your adultery." Ryan attempted to be the voice of reason. "Look, I understand you're upset, but Jessica and I have a connection that can't be denied. We're not trying to hurt anyone, we're just following our hearts." "Following your hearts," I repeated. "That's romantic. I'm sure Jessica's nursing supervisor will find it romantic too when I send her these photos showing that Jessica has been lying about working extra shifts so she could spend time with you." Jessica's face went pale. "You wouldn't try to get me fired over this." "Watch me," I said. "See, Jessica, when you decided to use your workplace as an alibi for your affair, you made your employer a participant in your deception. I'm sure they'll appreciate knowing that one of their nurses has been falsifying her work schedule to meet her boyfriend." I showed them another photo on my phone, a screenshot of Jessica's text message where she told Ryan she'd told me she was working a double shift so they could spend the evening together. "This is evidence of timecard fraud," I said. "You've been claiming to work shifts that you weren't actually working, and using your employer's reputation to cover your affair. Most hospitals take that kind of ethical violation very seriously." Ryan started getting defensive. "This is getting out of hand. Yes, Jessica and I are in love, but we're both adults who have the right to choose who we want to be with." "You're absolutely right," I said. "Adults do have the right to choose. Jessica chose to have an affair instead of talking to me about problems in our marriage. You chose to pursue a married woman with children instead of focusing on your own divorce and healing. And I'm choosing to make sure there are appropriate consequences for those choices." I pulled out a folder of documents that I'd brought with me. Speaking of choices, I've made some interesting ones myself. For example, I chose to have Jessica's phone records subpoenaed through my attorney. Want to guess what we found? Jessica and Ryan exchanged worried glances. Jessica asked what I was talking about. "I'm talking about the fact that you two have been texting and calling each other constantly for the past 5 months, I said. "Including during work hours, during family time, And even during our date night last month when you kept excusing yourself to check on a patient. I showed them a printed summary of their communication patterns. You've sent over 3,000 text messages to each other in 5 months. For comparison, Jessica and I have exchanged maybe 200 text messages in the same period. Guess which relationship you've been prioritizing? Ryan was starting to look nervous. Those are private communications between two consenting adults. They were private, I corrected. But when those private communications involve planning to break up a marriage and discussing how to hide an affair from a spouse, they become evidence in divorce proceedings. Which brings me to my next reconnection. I pulled out another document from the folder. I reconnected with the court system. This is a petition for divorce citing adultery, with a request for full custody of our children based on Jessica's infidelity and dishonesty. Jessica started crying. You can't take my kids away from me because of this. I can't, I agreed. But you might have done that yourself. See, when you chose to have an affair, you chose to prioritize your relationship with Ryan over your relationship with Emma and Jake. When you chose to lie to them about where you were and what you were doing, you chose deception over being a good role model. I showed them another document. This is a report from the private investigator documenting all the times you told our children you had to work late when you were actually here with Ryan. Emma asked me last week why mommy has to work so much more than other kids' mommies. I had to lie to my own daughter to cover for your affair. Ryan tried to defend Jessica. She's a good mother. This situation is complicated, but it doesn't change the fact that she loves her kids. You're right that she loves her kids, I said. But love without integrity isn't enough. Jessica has been teaching our children that it's okay to lie when you want something that you shouldn't have. She's been showing them that commitments don't matter when feelings change. I pulled out my phone again and showed them a photo I'd taken the previous week. It showed Emma and Jake sitting at the kitchen table working on homework alone while Jessica was supposedly at work but actually at Ryan's apartment. This is what Jessica's great love story looks like from our children's perspective, I said. Two kids wondering why their mom is never around anymore and why she seems distracted and distant when she is home. Jessica was sobbing now. I never meant for this to happen. Ryan and I just reconnected and the feelings were so strong. I thought I could manage both relationships. Manage both relationships? I said. Jessica, you can't manage a marriage and an affair simultaneously. You chose Ryan over our family. You chose lies over honesty. You chose your past over your present. I showed them one final document. And I chose to protect our children from the consequences of your choices. This is a custody agreement that gives me primary custody with supervised visitation for you until you can demonstrate that you're stable and committed to putting our children's needs first. Ryan looked confused. Supervised visitation? That seems extreme. Does it? I asked. Jessica has been lying to our children for months about where she is and what she's doing. She's been prioritizing her relationship with you over her responsibilities as a mother. She's been using her workplace as an alibi for an affair. How do I know she won't lie to our children about other things? How do I know she won't expose them to inappropriate situations? I put the documents back in the folder. See, Ryan, when you decided to pursue a married mother, you weren't just affecting Jessica and me. You were affecting two innocent children who didn't ask to have their family destroyed so their mother could relive her college romance. Jessica wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. What do you want from me? What would it take for you to reconsider the divorce? I looked at Jessica, who was asking me to forgive her affair and work on our marriage while she was standing in her boyfriend's apartment wearing his robe. What I want is for you to understand that your choices have consequences that go beyond your feelings. I want you to understand that when you chose to have an affair, you chose to end our marriage, I continued. I want you to understand that when you chose to lie to our children, you chose to damage their ability to trust you. And I want you to understand that when you chose Ryan over our family, you chose a future that doesn't include me. Ryan stepped forward again. Look, maybe we can all sit down and work this out like adults. Jessica and I don't want to hurt anyone unnecessarily. You don't want to hurt anyone unnecessarily? I said. Ryan, you pursued a married woman with children. You encouraged her to lie to her husband and kids. You helped her plan to leave her family. The only thing you did was hurt people unnecessarily. I headed toward the door, then turned back to them. But you're right about one thing. We should handle this like adults. Adults face the consequences of their actions instead of making excuses. Adults prioritize their children's well-being over their own desires. Adults take responsibility for the damage they cause. Update 2. I left Ryan's apartment and drove home to find Emma and Jake watching TV and eating cereal for dinner because Jessica was supposed to be working late and I'd been dealing with a confrontation. Seeing my kids taking care of themselves because their mother was having an affair crystallized my resolve to protect them from any further damage. I made them a proper dinner and helped them with their homework, all while planning my next moves. Jessica didn't come home that night, which actually made my job easier since I didn't have to pretend everything was normal in front of the kids. The next morning, Jessica called asking if we could talk privately. She said she'd spent the night thinking about everything I'd said and wanted to discuss how to move forward. I agreed to meet her for coffee, curious to see whether she was ready to take responsibility or was going to try to manipulate her way out of consequences. Jessica arrived at the coffee shop looking exhausted and emotional. She'd clearly been crying and appeared to have slept very little. She immediately launched into what sounded like a prepared speech about how sorry she was and how much she loved our family. "I know I messed up," she said. "I know I made terrible choices and hurt people I love. But this thing with Ryan just happened so fast and the feelings were so intense that I lost perspective on what really mattered." I asked Jessica where she'd spent the night. She admitted she'd stayed at Ryan's apartment but claimed they just talked about the situation and tried to figure out how to handle everything. "We both realized that we need to slow down and think about the bigger picture," she said. "Ryan doesn't want to be the reason our children lose their family, and I don't want to destroy what we've built together." I told Jessica that it was too late to worry about destroying what we'd built, since she'd already done that when she chose to have an affair. I said the only question now was how much additional damage she wanted to cause by continuing to lie and make excuses. "I'm not making excuses," Jessica said defensively. "I'm trying to take responsibility and figure out how to fix this." I showed Jessica the divorce papers I'd filed that morning. "This is how you take responsibility. You sign these papers, agree to the custody arrangement, and start focusing on rebuilding your relationship with our children instead of continuing your affair." Jessica looked shocked. "You already filed? I thought we were going to talk about this and try to work things out." "Work things out?" I said. "Jessica, last night you were in your boyfriend's apartment wearing his clothes while your children were home alone eating cereal for dinner. What exactly did you think we were going to work out?" Jessica started crying again. "I know it looks bad, but Ryan and I really do love each other. We've been apart for 15 years and finding each other again feels like destiny. Can't you understand that some connections are too strong to ignore?" I told Jessica that I understood she had strong feelings for Ryan, but that she'd chosen to explore those feelings while married with children. I said if she'd wanted to pursue her destiny with Ryan, she should have filed for divorce first instead of having an affair. "But I was scared," Jessica said. "I was scared that if I left you for Ryan and it didn't work out, I'd lose everything and have nothing. I thought maybe I could figure out my feelings without blowing up our family." "So you decided to have your cake and eat it too," I said. "You decided to keep me as a backup plan while you explored whether Ryan was a better option. You decided to risk our children's security so you could have a safety net while chasing your college boyfriend." Jessica admitted that she'd been selfish but said she was ready to choose our family now. She said she'd realized that what she had with Ryan was based on nostalgia and fantasy, while what we had was real and solid. "I want to fight for our marriage," she said. "I want to prove to you that I can be the wife and mother you deserve. I'll cut off all contact with Ryan and do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust." I asked Jessica why I should believe her promise to cut contact with Ryan when she'd been lying to me for months about their relationship. I pointed out that she'd had multiple opportunities to be honest and had chosen deception every time. "Because losing you and the kids would destroy me," she said. "Because I realize now that I was throwing away everything good in my life for a fantasy that couldn't live up to reality." I told Jessica that her realization had come too late. I said that even if she was sincere about wanting to save our marriage, I couldn't trust her anymore and didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if she was telling the truth. "You've shown me that when you're unhappy or confused, you choose deception over communication," I said. "You've shown me that when an attractive alternative appears, you explore it instead of working on what you have. You've shown me that you're willing to risk our children's well-being for your own emotional needs." Jessica begged me to reconsider, saying that people make mistakes and deserve second chances. She said that our marriage was worth fighting for and that our children deserve to have their parents try to work things out. "Our children deserve to have parents who model honesty, commitment, and integrity," I said. "You've failed at all three of those things. The best thing you can do for Emma and Jake now is accept the consequences of your choices and focus on being a better mother moving forward." 2 days later, I got a call from Jessica's supervisor at the hospital. Apparently, Jessica had been called in for a meeting about discrepancies in her work schedule. The supervisor said they'd received an anonymous tip about Jessica falsifying her timesheets and wanted to investigate. I didn't admit to being the one who contacted the hospital, but I wasn't surprised by the investigation. Jessica had been lying about working extra shifts for months, and her employer deserved to know that she'd been using their reputation to cover her affair. Jessica called me that evening crying about the hospital investigation. She said they'd suspended her pending a full review of her work records and that she might lose her job. "They're treating me like a criminal over some scheduling mistakes," she said. "I never meant to defraud anyone. I just got confused about which shifts I was actually working." I told Jessica that lying about working when she was actually with Ryan wasn't a scheduling mistake, it was fraud. I said she'd made a deliberate choice to use her workplace as an alibi and now she had to face the professional consequences. "You're enjoying this," Jessica accused. "You're enjoying watching my life fall apart because you're angry about Ryan." "I'm not enjoying anything," I said. "I'm just refusing to protect you from the consequences of your own choices. You created this situation when you decided to have an affair. Now you get to deal with all the fallout." 1 week later, Ryan called me asking if we could meet to discuss the situation. He said he felt responsible for the problems between Jessica and me and wanted to try to make things right. I agreed to meet Ryan, curious to hear what he had to say and wanting to gauge whether he was actually remorseful or just trying to manipulate the situation. Ryan met me at a restaurant and immediately started talking about how sorry he was for his role in destroying my marriage. He said he'd never intended for things to go as far as they did and that he felt terrible about the impact on our children. "I know you have every right to hate me," Ryan said. "I pursued a married woman and helped her lie to her family. I let my feelings override my judgment and caused a lot of pain for innocent people." I asked Ryan if he was planning to continue his relationship with Jessica. He said they'd decided to take a break while Jessica dealt with her divorce and custody issues. "We realized that our relationship was built on deception and fantasy," he said. "We were so focused on recapturing what we had 15 years ago that we ignored the reality of our current situations." I told Ryan that I appreciated his apology but that it didn't change anything. I said the damage was done and there was no going back to the way things were before. "I understand that," Ryan said. "But I'm hoping that maybe someday you can forgive me and Jessica enough to let us all move forward peacefully. Your kids don't deserve to be caught in the middle of adult drama." I agreed that Emma and Jake didn't deserve to be caught in the middle, which was exactly why I was seeking full custody. I said Jessica had shown that she was willing to prioritize her relationship with Ryan over her responsibilities as a mother. "She made mistakes," Ryan said, "but she's a good mother who loves her kids. Taking them away from her seems extreme." "Taking them away from her?" I said. "Ryan, Jessica took herself away from them when she chose to spend her time with you instead of being present for her family. I'm just making that choice official." Update 3. The divorce proceedings moved quickly since Jessica didn't contest the adultery claim and the evidence was overwhelming. The custody hearing was more complicated, with Jessica arguing that her affair didn't make her a bad mother and that the children needed both parents in their lives. Jessica's attorney argued that while her marriage had failed, there was no evidence that she'd ever neglected or endangered the children. They portrayed the affair as a personal failing that didn't reflect her parenting abilities. My attorney presented evidence of Jessica's pattern of deception, including the time she'd lied to the children about working late when she was actually with Ryan. We showed the court photos of Emma and Jake home alone during times when Jessica claimed to be at work but was actually at her boyfriend's apartment. Mrs. Thompson has demonstrated a willingness to prioritize her personal relationships over her children's needs, my attorney argued. She has shown a pattern of dishonesty that undermines her ability to provide the stability and trust that children require. The judge was clearly troubled by the evidence of Jessica's deception, particularly the impact on the children. However, she was reluctant to award full custody without more evidence of actual harm to Emma and Jake. The custody arrangement we ultimately received gave me primary custody with Jessica having supervised visitation for the first 6 months, then standard visitation if she completed parenting classes and demonstrated stability. The court recognizes that infidelity doesn't automatically disqualify someone from being a parent, the judge said. However, the pattern of deception and the prioritization of personal relationships over parental responsibilities raises concerns about judgment and reliability. Jessica was devastated by the custody decision but had no choice but to accept it. She'd lost her marriage, her job was in jeopardy, and now she had limited access to her children. The hospital investigation concluded that Jessica had violated their ethics policies by falsifying work records. She was terminated for cause, which meant she couldn't collect unemployment benefits and would have difficulty finding another nursing position. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual friends that Jessica and Ryan's relationship had ended. Apparently, the stress of the divorce, custody battle, and job loss had taken a toll on their great love story. Reality set in pretty quickly once they didn't have the excitement of sneaking around, one friend told me. Ryan realized he'd gotten involved with a woman who was willing to lie to her husband and children, and Jessica realized that Ryan was willing to pursue married women. Neither of them felt like they could trust the other. Jessica moved in with her sister and started working at a clinic in another town. She attended parenting classes and therapy as required by the court and gradually rebuilt her relationship with Emma and Jake. The supervised visitation period was difficult for everyone. Emma and Jake were confused about why they couldn't stay overnight with their mother and why there always had to be a supervisor present during visits. "Why can't mommy be trusted alone with us?" Emma asked me one day. "Did she do something dangerous?" I struggled with how to explain the situation to a 10-year-old without completely destroying her relationship with her mother. I told Emma that sometimes adults make choices that show they need help learning how to prioritize their responsibilities, and that the supervised visits were temporary while mommy worked on becoming a better parent. "Mommy made some choices that hurt our family," I said. "She wasn't dangerous, but she forgot that being a parent means always putting your children first. The court wants to make sure she remembers that before she can have sleepovers with you and Jake again." Emma seemed to understand this explanation, though she was clearly sad about the situation. Jake, being younger, was more focused on when he could have normal visits with his mother again. After 6 months of supervised visitation and completing her required classes, Jessica was granted standard visitation rights. She could have the children every other weekend and one evening per week, with the possibility of longer visits during school breaks. Jessica had used the supervised visitation period wisely. She'd focused entirely on the children during their time together, put away her phone, and made genuine efforts to rebuild their trust. The supervisor's reports were consistently positive about her interactions with Emma and Jake. "Ms. Thompson appears to have learned from her mistakes," the supervisor wrote in her final report. "She has demonstrated consistent prioritization of her children's needs during visits and has shown genuine remorse for the impact of her previous choices." 1 year after the divorce was finalized, Jessica reached out asking if we could meet to discuss our co-parenting relationship. She said she wanted to apologize properly and see if we could find a way to work together better for the children's sake. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd had our confrontation a year earlier. Jessica looked different, more mature somehow, and genuinely remorseful rather than defensive. "I know I can't undo the damage I caused," she said. "But I want you to know that I understand now how selfish and destructive my choices were. I threw away a good marriage and hurt our children because I was chasing a fantasy that was never real." I told Jessica that I appreciated her apology and that I could see she'd made genuine efforts to change. I said that while I couldn't forgive her betrayal of our marriage, I was willing to work with her to co-parent effectively. "Emma and Jake need both of their parents," I said. "As long as you continue to prioritize their needs and maintain honesty in your interactions with them, I'm committed to making this work." Jessica asked if there was any possibility that we could eventually reconcile and rebuild our marriage. She said she'd learned from her mistakes and would never make the same choices again. "That door closed when you chose Ryan over our family," I told her. "I'm glad you've learned and grown from this experience, but the foundation of trust that a marriage requires is permanently broken between us." Jessica cried but said she understood. She said she hoped that someday I might find happiness with someone who deserved the loyalty and commitment I'd shown her. 2 years after the divorce, I started dating Sarah, a teacher at Emma's school who had been supportive during the custody transition. Sarah understood the situation with Jessica and was patient about the complexities of blended family dynamics. Emma and Jake liked Sarah and gradually accepted her presence in our lives. Jessica was initially jealous and made some comments about me moving on quickly, but eventually accepted that I had the right to find happiness with someone new. "Sarah seems nice," Jessica told me during one of our co-parenting check-ins. "I'm glad you found someone who appreciates what a good man you are. I'm sorry it took losing you for me to realize what I had." Today, 3 years after the affair was discovered, we've settled into a functional co-parenting relationship. Jessica has rebuilt her nursing career and seems to have learned from her mistakes. She's dating someone new, a divorced father who understands the importance of putting children first. Emma and Jake have adjusted well to the new family structure. They love having 2 homes and have learned valuable lessons about honesty, commitment, and the importance of making good choices even when feelings are complicated. Jessica still struggles with guilt about her affair and its consequences, but she's channeled that guilt into being a better mother in person. She's never missed a visitation, always communicates honestly about schedules and issues, and has shown genuine growth in her priorities. "I destroyed the best thing in my life because I thought I deserved something better," Jessica told me recently. "I learned that what I had was already better than anything I could have imagined. I just hope our kids don't repeat my mistakes." The most satisfying part isn't Jessica's regret or the consequences she faced, it's watching Emma and Jake thrive in an environment built on honesty and stability. They've learned that actions have consequences, that trust must be earned and maintained, and that real love means choosing someone every day, not just when feelings are easy. Ryan moved away about a year after the affair ended and has never contacted any of us again. I heard through mutual friends that his divorce was finalized and he's struggled to maintain relationships since then. Apparently, his reputation for pursuing married women has made him less attractive to potential partners. Looking back, I'm grateful that Jessica's affair forced me to confront the reality of our marriage and make a clean break rather than spending years trying to rebuild something that was fundamentally broken. The affair wasn't just a mistake, it was a revelation of who Jessica really was when faced with difficult choices. The children have learned that sometimes people we love make choices that hurt us, but that doesn't mean we have to accept ongoing mistreatment or dishonesty. They've seen that it's possible to forgive someone while still maintaining appropriate boundaries and consequences. Most importantly, Emma and Jake have learned that real love is about commitment, honesty, and putting the people you care about first, not about following feelings wherever they lead or making excuses for hurtful behavior. When Jessica chose to reconnect with Ryan, she thought she was choosing love over obligation. What she actually chose was fantasy over reality, selfishness over responsibility, and temporary feelings over lasting commitment. The consequences of that choice are something she'll live with forever, but the lessons our children learn from watching those consequences play out will serve them well for the rest of their lives.